Hello everyone and welcome to Archaeo Viking. Today is the official 24th video and unofficial 18th video in my series on the early imperial expansion of the United States. The subject of today's video is the Texas Republic in the early imperial United States. Starting with the background to the Texas Republic. So the background to the Texas Republic is a long and complex history that is very much connected to the winning of independence for the Mexican state of Coahuila y Tejas from Mexico in the Texas Revolution between 1835 and 1836 CE. And again, this is a very complex subject that I have already covered in depth in a video on the Texas Revolution that I will link in the iCard. After winning its independence, the Tejas portion of the province of Coahuila y Tejas would form the Republic of Texas in 1836 CE, with Sam Houston being elected the first president of the Texas Republic on October 22nd, 1836 CE. And of course, in this very same year, the Constitution of Texas would also be created, with much of its provisions being borrowed from the United States Constitution, with a few exceptions, such as the provision that no member of clergy was eligible for service in an elected office. The Constitution required at least a belief in a higher power. Individuals who profited from the higher government or held public money were ineligible for service in the state legislature. The right to free enterprise was acknowledged, but monopolies were prohibited. And the issue of chattel slavery was a major part of the Texas Constitution. Also, presidents could only serve 2 terms, 2 years in their first term and 3 years in their second term, and were unable to serve 2 consecutive terms, meaning they could serve 2 terms, but they couldn't be back to back. And here's the source I got that information from. And as I said, the issue of chattel slavery was very integral to the Texas Constitution, with the Texas Constitution making chattel slavery legal in the Texas Republic, specifically in Section 9 of the General Provisions, which stated that people of color who had been servants for life under Mexican law would become property, that Congress could pass no law restricting immigrants from bringing their enslaved people into Texas, that Congress could not have the power to emancipate enslaved people, that enslavers may not free enslaved servants without congressional approval unless the freed people left Texas, with free persons of African descent being required to petition the Texas Congress for permission to continue living in the country, and Africans and descendants of Africans and Native Americans being excluded from the class of persons having rights. And again, as in the previous slide, here's the source I got this information from. Then, in 1838 CE, the Texas legislature would petition the United States to annex Texas into the United States. However, John Quincy Adams would prevent the motion from coming to a vote by filibustering for 22 days. As a result, President Martin Van Buren, unwilling to cause a political scandal, would refuse to annex Texas into the United States. As a result of this, Texas would begin inviting white Americans to immigrate to Texas, with many white Americans doing this to escape an economic depression going on at the time that was known as the Panic of 1837 CE. Which now brings us to the Texas Republic itself, starting with the first Sam Houston presidency. Just 1 year after his election to the office of President of the Republic of Texas, Sam Houston would move the Texas capital to the city of Houston, obviously named after himself, in 1837 CE. And on December 16th, 1837 CE, He would attempt to ratify an 1835 CE treaty signed with Chief Bowles and the Texas Cherokee. However, Mirabeau Bonaparte Lamar, a longtime proponent of the removal of all Native Americans from Texas and the United States, as well as the majority of the Texas legislature, would refuse to ratify this treaty. This would lead to increased tensions between the Republic of Texas and the Texas Cherokee. Sam Houston would also begin peace negotiations with the Comanche and Kiowa nations. However, again, Mirabeau, Bonaparte Lamar, and other supporters of Indian removal would continue to hamper peace talks, which would lay the groundwork for the future wars between the Comanche Nation, the Kiowa Nation, and the Texas Republic. On November 10th, 1837 CE, after a raid on a Texas settlement by the Kittaish or the Kitsai Nation, 18 Texas Rangers would pursue and engage 150 warriors of the Kitsai Nation. However, the Rangers would be quickly defeated by the larger force and withdraw back to the Republic of Texas, with the Rangers losing 10 men in the skirmish, and this event becoming known as the Battle of the Stone Houses. Then, on October 5th, 1838 CE, white American homesteaders would begin clearing Texas Cherokee land for crops and building homes. Cherokee warriors would then attack and kill 18 white American settlers, believing that their lands had been violated by the white American settlers, with this event leading to increased tension between the Lamar faction of the Texas Republic and the Texas Cherokee, and this event becoming known as the Kiowa Massacre. Then, between 1838 and 1839 CE, local alcalde or magistrate Vicente Cordova would launch a rebellion against the Texas Republic. At first, Houston would attempt to negotiate with the rebels. However, the rising tensions would lead Houston to order the Texan militia to put down the rebellion. This now brings us to our next section, the presidency of Mirabeau Lamar. Mirabeau Lamar would be elected the second president of Texas on December 10th, 1838 CE. Afterwards, in 1839 CE, Lamar would move the capital of Texas to the city of Austin, named after the so-called father of Texas, Stephen F. Austin. Then, between July 15th and 16th, 1839 CE, Lamar would order the removal of the Texas Cherokee, igniting the short Texas-Cherokee War. The Texas Cherokee would be defeated and driven out of Texas by the Texas Rangers at the Battle of Neches. I've already done an in-depth video on the Texas Cherokee and the Texas Cherokee War that I will link in the iCard. Then in 1839, a feud over land ownership between white American settlers in Texas's Harrison and Shelby counties would result in a series of livestock raids and murders known as the Regulator-Moderator War that would last well into 1844 CE. On March 19th, 1840 CE, Lamar would invite 65 Comanche, including several Comanche chiefs led by prominent Comanche chief Mukwuro, to San Antonio, Texas. The Comanche would arrive unarmed with captives in tow to be returned to the Republic of Texas. Unsatisfied with the number of captives returned, the Texas garrison would proceed to massacre the Comanche delegation, killing 35 Comanche and capturing 29 more. Meanwhile, the Texas garrison would only lose 7 men, with this event becoming known as the Council House Fight. And I've already done an in-depth video on the Comanche, as well as an in-depth discussion on the Council House Fight that I will link in the iCard. In response to the Council House Fight, Comanche war chiefs Buffalo Hunt, Old Owl, Santa Anna, not to be mistaken with the Mexican president Santa Anna, Yellow Wolf, Amorous Man, and Monica would lead 400 Comanche warriors to attack the towns of Victoria and Linville. The Comanche warriors would sack the cities, kill several white Americans, and capture a large amount of goods, with this event becoming known as the Great Raid of 1840 CE. In response, the Texas Rangers would pursue an attempt to defeat the Comanche led by Buffalo Hump and the other war chiefs at the Battle of Plum Creek. However, the Texas Rangers would be unable to advance on the Comanche position, with the Comanche suffering minimal casualties and being able to make off with the majority of the items captured at Victoria and Linville. This would make the Comanche raid a success and the Texas Rangers' attempt at retaliation a failure, with this battle happening specifically on August 12th, 1840 CE. And again, I've already, much like the Councilhouse fight, I've already covered these events in depth in my video on the Comanche and Kiowa nations that I will link in the iCard. In response to the successful raid, Mirabeau Lamar would dispatch the Texas Rangers to raid Comanche and Kiowa villages with impunity. The Texas Rangers would indiscriminately attack primarily undefended Comanche and Kiowa villages, where they would kill children and regularly rape women. However, unsurprisingly, this would not stop the Comanche Kiowa raids on Texas, as the massacres would be met with further retaliatory raids by the Comanche Nation and the Kiowa Nation between 1840 and 1845 CE. Then, between 1839 and 1842 CE, Lamar would attempt to introduce the Texan redback as the main form of Texan currency. However, the Texas Congress would refuse to accept them at face value, and Texans would increasingly rely on United States currency, Canadian shin plaster currency, and private obligations. Lamar, and because of this, would suffer heavy criticism for mishandling the Texas economy. Now, this brings us to what could be argued is the biggest debacle of Lamar's presidency, the Texan Santa Fe Expedition. So, what was this expedition? Well, on June 19th, 1841 CE, seeking to compete with the lucrative trade conducted over the Santa Fe Trail and also seeking to annex the eastern half of the Mexican state of Nuevo Mexico into Texas, Lamar would assemble a large baggage train consisting of merchants, businessmen, and 320 Texan soldiers, including Texas Rangers, but not only Texas Rangers. The baggage train would carry merchandise worth $200,000. And here's a map of the Santa Fe Trail that they were seeking to participate in the trade of. After the expedition departed, it would be beset by poor planning, drought, lack of supplies, and unsurprisingly sporadic raids by Comanche and Kiowa warriors. Upon arriving to Santa Fe, the exhausted and dwindling expedition was immediately met by a Mexican army consisting of 1,500 soldiers, as the governor of Nuevo Mexico had been notified of the expedition by Mexican scouts well in advance, with this expedition arriving to Santa Fe in September of 1841 CE. In no state to fight, the expedition would surrender, and over the winter would be marched 2,000 miles to by the Mexican army to the Perote prison in the Mexican state of Veracruz, with this march happening between 1841 and 1842 CE. Between June 13th and September 5th, 1842 CE, diplomatic efforts would be conducted to secure the release of the expedition, with the release eventually being secured and the expedition returning to Texas, ending the disastrous affair, with Lamar being blamed for the failure of the expedition. Now, that being said, during his presidency, Lamar did make some diplomatic overtures to other nations. He would try several times and fail several times to receive peace settlements from the Republic of Mexico. And he would also try and fail several times to obtain recognition for the Republic of Texas from multiple nations, such as the British Empire, the French Empire, and the Kingdom of Belgium. Now, this brings us to our next section, the second presidency of Sam Houston. So, in the Texas presidential election, I do need to make that distinction, obviously. In the Texas presidential election of 1841 CE, Sam Houston would defeat David G. Burnett. As Texas was bankrupt from the Santa Fe expedition and unable to pay the United States ship that had returned several members of the expedition, Houston would order the ship to be commandeered in 1842 CE. And also, at the same time, following similar patterns to Lamar, Houston would begin making diplomatic overtures to foreign nations, such as the British Empire and the French Empire, specifically currying favor with them, hoping that they would convince the United States to annex Texas into the United States. However, there is also another major factor to Houston's second presidential term. There were several Mexican invasions of Texas during this time, with the first being an event that occurred on March 5th, 1842 CE, when 500 Mexican soldiers invaded Texas and briefly occupied San Antonio before returning to Mexico. Then, in September 11th, 1842 CE, French-Mexican General Adrien Wall would invade Texas with 1,400 soldiers, where he would lay siege to and eventually reoccupy San Antonio. However, in retaliation to the capture of San Antonio, Wall's army would be defeated by the Texan army at the Battle of Salado, and Wall and the Mexican army would return to Mexico during the night on September 17th, 1842 CE. Also, between April 30th and May 16th, 1843 CE, the Mexican Navy would engage a combined force of warships from the Republic of Texas and the Republic of Yucatan in the 2-week-long naval battle of Campeche. The battle would end with a combined Texan and Yucatan victory. There were also other conflicts during Houston's second term. For one thing, Houston would attempt to move the Texas National Archives back to the city of Houston and reestablish Houston as the capital of Texas, with this resulting in small skirmishes between supporters of Houston and Lamar. And eventually the archives would be returned to Austin, with this event becoming known as the Texas Archive War, lasting between August 30th and August 31st, 1842 CE. Houston would also order 500 Texan soldiers to arrest the instigators of the regulator-moderator war, officially ending the conflict on August 14th, 1844 CE. Also, during this time, the constant warfare between the Comanche Nation, the Kiowa Nation, and the Republic of Texas would bankrupt the Republic of Texas and exhaust both the Comanche Nation and the Kiowa Nation, which would lead the reelected Sam Houston to negotiate a peace treaty between the Comanche Nation, the Kiowa Nation, and the Republic of Texas in December of 1845 CE. All right, now this brings us to our next section, the Society of the Republic of Texas. Starting with the criteria of citizenship for the Republic of Texas, which right off the bat, the Constitution of Texas established different rights according to the race and ethnicity of each individual. Section 10 of the general provisions of the Constitution stated that all persons who resided in Texas on the day of the Declaration of Independence were considered citizens of the Republic, except for, quote, Africans, the descendants of Africans, and Indians. For white American immigrants, Section 6 established to become citizens that they need to reside in Texas for at least 6 months and take an oath of loyalty to the Republic. Under Section 9, enslaved African Americans brought to Texas were to remain enslaved and could not be emancipated without the consent of Congress. Further, as we already discussed at the beginning of the video, Congress was not allowed to make laws banning or restricting either chattel slavery or the slavery trade. Section 9 also established that, quote, no free person of African descent, either in whole or in part, shall be permitted to reside permanently in the Republic without the consent of Congress. And here is that source that I got this information from. Then we come to the government of the Republic of Texas, which, as we already stated in the beginning of the video, it was based on the United States Constitution. Like the United States, it had three branches of government: the executive, legislative, and judicial. The president, of course, was the head of the executive branch, with Congress consisting of 14 senators and 29 representatives, and the Supreme Court consisting of a chief justice appointed by the president and four associate justices. Officials were elected, including members of the Supreme Court, in contrast to the United States Supreme Court, where judges are appointed rather than elected. And the Bill of Rights was immediately included in the Constitution, whereas it had to be added to the Constitution later for the United States. And here's the source I got that information from. Now we're going to take a look at the Army of the Republic of Texas. So generally, during its existence, the Army of the Republic of Texas looked something like this. I mean, there was some variation, as there was a lot of militias that would be gathered during conflicts to supplement the Texas military, and obviously that meant that there were individuals who were rather diverse in their equipment. But when it comes to the official Texas military, this is sort of what they look like. And they would be issued several different guns, with the most common being the 1814 Common Rifle, as well as the U.S. Springfield Model 1812 Type 2 Flintlock Musket. Another very common rifle issued to the soldiers in the Texas military was the Kentucky Long Rifle, with common sidearms of soldiers in the Texas military being flintlock pistols, as well as the artillery sword that was a common side sword for soldiers in the United States Army at the time. And as the Texas Republic being a sort of offshoot of the United States, it's not surprising that the Army of the Texas Republic would also be issued these swords. Some members of the Texas Army may have also, depending on the individual, held Bowie knives. And we know some of them did, but again, it just depended on the individual. And the commanders of each regiment would be issued sabers. Also, the military of the Texas Republic had access to varying amounts of the common type of cannon used by militaries at the time, the 6-pound cannon. And obviously, the most famous branch of the Army of the Republic of Texas during this time, and most of its history, were the Texas Rangers, who were a group that could consist between 50 to roughly 500, who mainly acted as scouts and sort of border patrols that would patrol the borderlands of the Texas Republic, and would also act as a sort of paramilitary force to attack and raid Native American villages, and also launch raids into the Republic of Mexico as well. And the weapons that the Texas Rangers would use would be one, of course, unsurprisingly, they would have access to 1814 model muskets like or 1812 muskets, like the Texan Army, with the most common sidearm for the Texas Rangers being the relatively new Colt revolvers, and several of the Texas Rangers, though again, not all, this depended on the individual, being equipped with Bowie knives, and commanders of the Texas Rangers being equipped with sabers. Now, this brings us to the economy of the Republic of Texas. So, first off, much like most of the southern United States during the 1830s, as well as well into the 1860s, the economy of Texas was based primarily on agriculture and plantation farming. That being said, in Texas, the cattle industry was becoming increasingly lucrative, which was helped in large part by the importation of cattle from Mexico, as well as the presence of pre-existing Mexican ranches and vaqueros, the predecessors to the American cowboys, or the cowboys of the United States. The primary cash crop of the Republic of Texas was cotton, as you can see here and here, and in these previous pictures here. That being said, Texas would become bankrupt when cotton prices plummeted as a result of the Panic of 1837 CE. The Republic of Texas, again, much like most of the southern United States, was a culture built on chattel slavery, with chattel slavery being the African chattel slavery being the main driving force of the Texas economy. And as I have said repeatedly in most of the previous videos in the series, African chattel slavery was a brutal institution where individuals would be, as most commonly is associated with this institution, whipped or lashed for any minor infraction, but also they would be enslaved Africans and African Americans would be subject to other tortures, such as tying them up and beating them with a paddle, hangings, beatings with rods, and of course, executions for any minor infraction. And here's some more pictures showing these well-known phenomena. Also, entire African and African American families would be sold into enslavement and separated from each other in slave markets. And Bible verses would be used by white enslavers to justify enslaving African Americans, as seen in the use of Genesis 9, verses 18 through 27, as well as being seen in the use of the Apostle Paul's epistle to Ephesians 6, verses 5 through 7. And this is a subject that is discussed in length in the books by historians in books such as Stephen R. Haynes' Noah's Curse, The Biblical Justification of American Slavery, and Charles F. Irons' The Origins of Pro-Slavery Christianity. Now let's bring this to our next section, the infrastructure of the Republic of Texas. So, the infrastructure of the Republic of Texas consisted primarily of dirt roads that were dusty and dry weather, which would not necessarily impede travel. However, they would become heavily muddy in wet weather, which would certainly make travel and communication significantly slower and more difficult than in the United States, as we already discussed in my video on the Jacksonian era that I will link in the iCard. At the same time, this infrastructure was existing in the Republic of Texas. In the United States, infrastructure was being updated and expanded, i.e., and improved, allowing for much quicker travel and communication in the United States as compared to the Republic of Texas. And here's a map showing sort of the central roads of the Republic of Texas, or one of the central roads of the Republic of Texas. Now, this brings us to our next section, education in the Republic of Texas. So generally, the form of education that was provided to to children in the Republic of Texas consisted and came in the form of one-room schoolhouses in small towns and villages, with these schools often being unfunded and teachers having minimal, if any, training at all. That being said, female seminaries, which were essentially private schools for girls and young women, were numerous. And often families would send children to better funded schools in the United States, which would unsurprisingly further deprive Texas educators of funding. Uh, Now, despite the shortcomings of the education system in the Texas Republic for children, the Texas government would fund the construction of several universities, such as Ruttersville College and Baylor University between 1840 and 1845 CE. Now, this brings us to the presidency of Anson Jones and the annexation of Texas by the United States. So Anson Jones would win the Texas presidential election of 1844 CE. And pretty much immediately after winning that election, Jones and the Texas government would begin negotiating with the United States for the official annexation of Texas into the United States, with the United States officially annexing the Republic of Texas and making it the state of Texas on December 29th, 1845 CE, officially ending the Republic of Texas. Now this brings us to our last section, the aftermath of the annexation of the Republic of Texas into the United States. Well, for one thing, the annexation of the Republic of Texas into the United States, in part, obviously not completely, but definitely it played a major part in laying the groundwork for the eventual Mexican-American War that happened between 1846 and 1848 CE. Also, another thing that was, at least in part, in large part, due to the annexation of the Republic of Texas to the United States, would be that Native American nations in California, the American Southwest, and Oregon would fall prey to genocide at the hands of the United States. Obviously, this was not just these regions. There was also the Great Basin and the Great Plains, um, with these genocides happening between 1849 and well into the 1900s CE. And here's maps of Native American nations here, as well as here and here, and here. And then in 1861, Texas would secede from the United States to protect the institution of chattel slavery, becoming a member of the Confederate States of America and the American Civil War that would last between 1861 and 1865 CE. All right, that brings an end to our video. As I have said already several times in most of the videos in the series, I really hope that in watching this video, you enjoyed caring about the culture and infrastructure, um, and education of the Texas Republic. However, I really hope you did not enjoy their views and use of African chattel slavery, as well as their treatment of Native Americans. And again, as I've said already previously in all these videos, I understand that it's very odd for me, the individual making the video, to say. However, I bring up these events not for entertainment, but for education, because they are far too often either overlooked in the United States education system, or at the very least downplayed, uh, if not both. And so it's very important to bring these to your attention as the viewer so that these events can be remedied and never happen again. With that, I'm going to end the video. If you would like to see me cover any of the things I mentioned in the video in greater detail in a later video, please feel free to leave a comment in the comment section. And remember to like, share, and subscribe. And I hope you all have a good day.